I'm really stressed. Oh, hello, recording just started. And so all those things are happening. All those things are
Sorry.
choices. That's okay. And for a lot of people will understand that the choices you make are about controlling the controllables. This is how we contain our anxiety. We spend a lot of time in personal resilience thinking about how do we get things in the circle of our control? How do we actually be focused our attention on those things? Now, in a business, of course, or an organization, we are thinking about the circle of concern because we're looking into the future and saying these things are going on. Okay, here's a pestle analysis looking at political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors. And we're saying what are our strengths and weaknesses to help us cope, but also what opportunities and threats do those things bring us? We're planning the future. When you look into the future, you're managing corporate anxiety. And that's why we do these things. And what we find in lots and lots of family businesses, this thing coming to life, which is that you have reality and you have drama. And drama is the narrative that goes on around the facts. You know, what you said in 1863, and my granddad wouldn't allow you to say that. And do you know your sister's doing this, that, and the other? And that, oh my goodness, the family drama that you get. And so some boardrooms operate what's called this BMW technique. You know this, Dr. T. I bet you tried one. And it's the blaming, moaning, and whinging method of thinking about working together. And of course, what you're doing is when you're ever blaming someone else, you're not taking accountability for the choices being made. And it's something worth thinking about because if you have blame in your culture, you have people not acting like adults, you have people acting like children. And as I said before, much more likely to happen in a family business. One of the things to remember about our energy, and this is the same for your organization as well, performance is explained by when we do things, not just how we do them. So making sure that you know when your peak energy is, your troughs are from energy, and when your recovery periods are. Making sure that you look at your working day and do the tough work when you're at your peak, and then you do your admin stuff when you're in the trough, and then you do your creative stuff when you're in recovery. For me, I'm at my peak, 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, early mornings. That's when I do my big reports, my heavy lifting, admin, meetings, all in the afternoon, recovery, creative stuff in the evening. However, when I'm a CEO at the moment, they like to do it the other way around. They like to spend hours in the morning gassing, having meetings, and opening up emails. Ah, what a waste of my brain. And we can look at overwhelm. We can use lots of techniques here. We can rethink of how we reallocate work. We think about how what's going on. Are we doing stuff that actually adds value? Are we doing stuff that has meaning? Are we doing things that actually we can do in a certain order that allows us to become more effective? You see, what we know is the brain itself is a prediction machine. It's sort of forecasting all the time what's going on. And the way it does this is to have patterns. Now, some of you will be looking at those pictures there, and some of you will be able to see can you see the owl?
I see the owl,
Yeah. Yeah, can you see
see
the
the
owl? And can
horse.
anyone see the horse? The horse in the clouds?
Jesus Christ? Is it
Yeah.
Jesus in the bread?
Jesus and the bread. And can anyone see the picture in that sort of swirly thing down below? Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
I don't
We
see that.
see patterns all over the place. And these patterns come to home when you do this. So, hello, my name's Lucy, and I was born with a selfie on my left ear. There you go. Look at Lucy's left ear. And
Yeah.
there's a picture of Lucy. Now, I only have to tell you that, and the human brain sees the pattern. It predicts and fills in the detail. Of course, if you see that slightly different angle, it doesn't look like a selfie at all. And a lot of our businesses are based around this idea of these biases, these shortcuts that the brain makes. And negativity bias is this instinctive thing that we have to be negative about the world. There's some cost bias. Some of you will know. You had this project that you did 10 years ago, and you're just doing it because we spent so much time, we can't let it go. You bring a consultant in, they say, what's the first thing you should do is get rid of that project? Oh, we can't. My sister's loves it. Gone because of course that's sunk cost bias, attributing too much value to things that cost something and deliver zero value. And of course, giving too much credence to people's experience and confirmation bias, which is believing everything you already believe in. So careful what you're thinking, because if they're not conscious choices, if they're not purposeful choices, somebody else is doing your thinking for you, and that makes you a victim and not an adult, which means you're not in an adult culture. So this idea of confirmation bias is, I'll go and talk to people and say, how are you today? I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I'm so busy. Well, you're spending an hour talking to me about absolutely nothing. So you can't be that busy. Change is difficult. Well, it's not actually. Change management's difficult because it's been led by a leader that knows nothing about it. Life is tough, and life's not tough. Actually, life's never been better. But that becomes our narrative, this hero narrative, and this lack of flexibility to listen to ourselves talking. And sometimes, I'm going to let you in on a secret. When we're thinking these thoughts, it's our parents thinking these thoughts for us. Ah, my goodness. And imagine if your father's sitting across the boardroom table thinking the thoughts his grandfather gave him. So now we've got thinking the sclerotic and 56 years old. So we have to get this mental nimbleness from things like reframing. I'm terrible at planning. At the moment, you put the time-bound element. No one likes me because of what I've done today. You take these global statements and you make them specific and time-bound. I'm such a failure because I did this. I always get stressed. I don't always get stressed. I get stressed in these particular times. So that thing about narrative is really interesting. As a leader and a manager, we're constantly listening to what people are saying. We're constantly hearing the narrative they are peddling, because when they peddle that narrative, their confirmation bias wants it to come true because people want to be right. And that's why things like mantras can help. I mean, I work with someone and it drives me nuts, but they say, it is what it is. And it's like, I know, I'm aware of it. but
Yeah.
it works. It is what it is. There you
Yeah.
go. One for free.
Yeah.
And when we're thinking about business resilience factors, one of the things I'd like to talk about is using, you've got your strategy and mission. You need to measure some of these things. You need to measure things which are interesting. You've got to start thinking a bit more in a more savvy way about these areas. So, for example, in the financial quadrant of what's going on in your business, are you really thinking about how you're investing when times are good? Are you building a war chest, or are you off buying a new BMW? Is the balance sheet right for funding? Because if you're going to do investment and M&As, and especially when the market turns and you want to be resilient, that's when bargains are about. That's when you can pick up other organizations, when you can pick up assets at less cost than anywhere else. And that's where people who are in investment work. They work when the markets are going up and down, because what they're doing is they're buying at the bottom and selling at the top. So becoming more financially literate is a part of being resilient.
Mhm.
So do we look at other than financial risks? I mean, does your budgeting and planning processes add value, or are they just about looking at the past all the time and figuring out how you can earn a bit more money? And this is where family businesses can go wrong, because sometimes we feel entitled. I've been in this business for 40 years. It's time for me to have my BMW. Well, actually, it's never time to have your BMW, because we always want to be thinking further forward until you retire and you get your lump sum, and then you can have your BMW. So I've got a thing about BMWs. Forgive me, I don't really like them, I suppose. They upset me many years ago. But here's
Yeah.
the thing, because things like financial measures and metrics, they're all lag indicators, they're all gone, they're all in the past. And if you think about how much time you spend in your businesses looking backwards to the financials, and then you think, well, actually, I should be looking at the things that generate the future. And this is process. So do our processes, operating model systems meet the test for agility? Are they all focused on today? Interesting, isn't it? When was the last time you improved your processes? I'll show you something later on. Do our processes generate ROI for themselves? Do your processes reflect the ambition you have? Do your processes take the strategy and link that strategy to the actions of every single person in that company? Or have you just bought an IT system and we all just do what it tells us? It's one of the challenges, isn't it? And the other bit, of course, of leading indicators is the actions of your people. Do you have the right people for now, in the right roles, and in the right reasons? And the fact that it's your sister isn't the right reason if they're not up to the job. Do we spend too much time thinking about today's performance, or look at potential? And is our leadership culture reinforcing the strategy of where we want to go, or the past? And these are good questions that coaches will ask you and will challenge you on and get you to defend yourself. And that stretches your thinking, get you thinking about the future. And these, of course, are the go-to-market piece. And of customers to fund growth. Is the brand truthful? In other words, are we saying we always tell the truth and then we go around the corner and we don't, which is
Mhm.
often the case. And also, does the customer have a voice in your business? Are they part of how the business is constructed? So this takes us into leadership, and I think leadership is changing at the moment. It's a very complex diagram, but you'll see things in here, some traditional leadership thoughts like, people who get to a certain level and they have what's called a career limiting focus, especially in organizations. They say, I've got to this certain level, I can't do anything more because actually I've got more to lose than gain. We've got people who sit in your businesses who will say things like, "Oh, I actually sort of fear my business." Well, I say, how do you fear your business or your people? They say, "Well, I can't tell them anything because I might hurt their feelings." And I'll say, "Well, that's all lovely, but then you're treating your people like children." And they say, "Well, they are my children." And of course, it's that thing about how, again, do we differentiate between that work relationship and that home relationship? And, we've got to get from this idea of what we call premature execution, which is just leaping into action all the time, because that's what we've always done, rather than actually thinking, what will that do in the future? How are we going to be brave? And so a few sort of things to look at here. Accountability, surprise, surprise. I'll always bang on about that. Being adult and making sure that we are what happens in the States, and to an extent what's happening in America at the moment, is that you've got people who are going in and doing this discontinuous change. They're taking the literal chainsaw to the American government, and it's called disruption. And what's interesting is the reason disruption is necessary is because businesses get sclerotic. They get locked down in their own way of doing the world. So why don't you do it for yourselves? It's really easy to become a disruptor in your own business. Just start by looking at process and thinking, how could I get 20% more, half as much in terms of revenue or whatever it might be? Just challenge yourself to think, give me a big target here and think about how my processes will change. And one of the things you've got to look at is the team, because if you're not being a good leader, you'll get poor teams. So you'll get at this idea of teams with not enough trust in them, a fear of conflict, not enough difference, a lack of commitment, and those sorts of things. So we're ending up with a very poor culture. Processes, straightforward. Go back, have a look at them. Look at your basic textbook on lean management and look for the waste in your processes. I'd be pretty confident if I came into any one of your organizations and I could make you a lot of money just by improving your processes. That's a claim, Dr. Dennis. That's a claim. And then we can do all sorts of things with process to make them better. And you can do groovy stuff. I'm whizzing through this. And here's the culture. Let's have a look at our culture. Let's fix our culture. Let's get a culture that we want rather than the one we've inadvertently got. And once you understand that culture is designed, then you can really start thinking about what you want to do. So there we are. I'm finished rabbiting on for a little while now. If there's one thing that you're thinking, that's interesting, I must think more about that, feel free to pop it in the chat. Go back to your business, carry out your audits, build your plan. Remember to look after yourself too. Be kind to yourself. And remember, you've got 72 hours to put something into action, or it'll disappear. There you go. So I shall now click out of sharing mode, if I may. And if anyone wants to ask questions, they can.
Thank you, Dr. Russell, for as always, straight to the point and very deep sentences that are very deep. When you hear them, you have to rethink about them. Whilst thinking, if you are not careful, Dr. Russell will state another important point. Thank you very much for such a powerful presentation. Guys, the chat box is there for us to also put up our questions. You can also put up your hand with the reaction button. I call you, then you ask your question. But something that strikes me is us being mindful of our thinking. And if you're not careful, somebody may manipulate you. Very powerful statement. So most of the time, we are not conscious of our thinking. We don't reflect too much of our actions and even link them to our purpose as a person, and then really being conscious of the activities that we engage in daily. The question whether it is going or going according as you have purported to achieve. So thank you very much for reinstating it again. And BMW also.
I know you like that one.
Yeah. So, hey,
I think
mm,
people don't understand the power of conscious, purposeful thought. And we have how can I put this? We have spent too much time over the last 20, 30 years thinking about our feelings much more than our thoughts. And we spent too much time obsessing and giving credence to our feelings, which have a place in the world, which are very important. But what we've done is we've done that perhaps at the, and this is contentious and I accept that, but maybe we've done it too much against our thoughts.
mm,
We have seemed to have reduced our faculty to understand the truth. We believe people's feelings and opinions rather than the truth sometimes. We don't have that sense of critical thinking that we used to have.
mm,
Critical thinking was on the syllabus when I was at school. It's
mm,
no longer there. And I encourage people to think of things like ROI and buyback mechanisms on soft things, on soft measures, because they're important. And we
yeah,
all need to be financially literate in an organization.
yeah. And I think we are not also getting enough time to do reflections and also minding our
Their
mind.
choices, their choices, Dennis.
Yes. And, we wake up early in the morning, we hop on the phone, no
Choice,
reflection, nothing.
choice,
We drive to
choice,
work, we
choice,
zoom straight into social media.
choice. They're all choices. And this is it. This is it. We talk about our lives as if someone else is in control of it.
Yeah,
And then once we realize we're in control of our own lives and we're
yeah,
making choices,
yeah,
then actually we realize we're accountable. We can't blame someone else because we hop on social media and waste an hour on TikTok. That's down to us. Oh, they made me do it. But they genuinely didn't.
yeah, yeah,
And sometimes it needs an external voice or an external eye looking over organizations to be able to say, are you aware you do this?
yeah.
I did some work years ago on like a real old time and motion study years ago, working with a team that were really, really, I think I told you this actually, that were very, very busy. And I
Mm,
went in to follow the team around and I discovered that for an hour and a quarter every single morning during the working day, they were talking about Chelsea Football Club and they
mm,
just talked about football. And then after lunch, they wouldn't talk about Chelsea Football Club in the break, by the way. They
yeah,
were talking about other things in the break, but they'd come back to work and they'd talk about football again. So basically, the 8 hour working hours of the day were not spent in work.
mm,
A lot of that was spent talking about football. Now, that's okay if that was Chelsea Football Club, but it wasn't. It was a manufacturing site in the west of London. So that
yeah,
wasn't quite so good. And
yeah.
the reason they were doing that is because they were so profoundly bored in their jobs.
Mm,
And of course, as a good leader manager, what you do is look for ways to think about what do we want to do with these jobs?
yeah,
Is it better to mechanize those jobs and use those people in a different way?
yeah. It's amazing. And on burnout, where you said that emailing or working on holidays on weekends, some of us, our phones have emails and we get email notifications, even in
Turn
the
them off.
weekend. And you want to reply the email as fast as possible, always working.
Choice. And that's fine and that's fine. I run my own business. I get emails 7 days a week and late in the evening and during the middle of the night because I work in different time zones. And that's fine because I like it and I'm not complaining about it. And
Yeah,
I'm not sort of moaning and whinging about it because it's fine. I'm absolutely
yeah,
fine with that.
yeah.
Um, but the issue is when someone's complaining about it and saying, oh, people are contracted at the
Mm,
weekend, we'll turn the notifications off then.
yeah.
People only contact you at the weekend because you've shown them it's okay by
Mm.
accepting it and replying to it.
Okay. Okay.
Remember the fundamental point of leadership. What is leadership really for, Dennis?
Mm,
What is it really for?
mm.
Go on, what would you say?
For leadership,
Yeah, what's the purpose of leadership?
so for me, in leadership, it's about vision and purpose. And if I'm leading a group of people, we really have to define why we are doing this and why we are doing what we do. So as a leader, you try to shape all the activities, everything you do to go with that why, answering that bigger why. That's my thought about leadership.
That's how. But
Mm,
what's the point of leadership? I mean, I want to be really, really contentious now.
mm,
If you look at everything to do with leadership, you look at engagement, you look at everything else. What we're trying to do as leaders is to get people to perform,
mhm.
to get people to give us more effort, to get people to produce results than we pay them for. Now, that's cynical, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's true. Look at the Gallup polls. What was Gallup all about? Engagement. Engagement is all about saying, how do we get our people so excited about work that they'll give us lots of extra work without having to be paid? What the person who's working at the weekend and answering emails, they've got a
Mm,
great leader, haven't they? Because what that person's done is put them in a position where they think they have to work at the weekend
mm,
for free. When you look at your annual salary, you have a look at the annual salary and you look at the number of hours it covers, 37 and a half, 40,
yeah.
whatever it is. But then you say now put every evening, Saturdays and Sundays, and then just look at your hourly rate.
Mm,
I did that with an exec recently, and it turned out, and they were on quite a lot of money. It turned out they ended up on about £11.50 an hour because they were working 100 hours a week.
mm, mm,
And you see, this is the thing. This is the thing about leadership, and this is the thing about resilience. It's
mhm,
about understanding that deal.
mm,
It's about understanding that it when you've got burnout happening and when you've got the organization slowing down and getting less effective, what's going on is that deal's gone out of kilter. So a resilient family business is great at predicting change and is always ahead of the curve. And what it
mm,
is it has happy people who are well contented and are giving you more than you would like. I mean, if you have meetings which are really productive and people go out, happy, knowing exactly what they want to do, taking proactive action and actually getting the organization to be running ahead of the market, that's a resilient business where people are always there. They're always turning up to work. I mean, some of the biggest problems you have in organizations that aren't surviving is people's sleep is suffering. People's are tired all the time. I mean,
yeah.
there's actually a condition now in the DSM called TATT, tires all the time,
Yeah.
and it's coming from cortisol poisoning from having too much stress in your body.
Yeah.
So what you'll have is poor leadership methods. You'll have one boss who's in control, and everybody else has to do what they say. It doesn't mean that they're underperforming. It just means that they're less resilient because as soon as that person goes, has maybe wins the lottery or leaves, that business is gone.
It's gone. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if and the purpose of a family business is often to pass it on.
Yeah.
I mean, who are you passing it on to? You're often passing it on to people that don't really want it.
Yeah. So I touching on the leadership again. So Cyril, your question has been touched by Dr. Russell. He answered the question. So in Africa and Ghana, you have a lot of the business owners or leaders. So this is family business. So it's also a way of advice. You have some of them who really drive the organization based on all these benefactors.
Sure.
And they train employees to fit that all these factors, replying emails when you're on break, when you're on family, to the
Sure.
point that even when some are pregnant and they are home preparing
Yeah.
for delivery, you have to do work, you have to, and the owners actually will threaten you and say that if you are not ready for the job, let me go home, let me pick another person who is ready to do that.
Yeah. It
So
happens.
the issue of unemployment also has a bit of not a bit, but has greater effect on
Of
building
course.
organizations that are that don't have burnout
Yeah.
factors,
And that's fine. No, none of that's a problem. Markets where is an oversupply of labor or an undersupply of opportunity,
Mm,
the balance of power swings, doesn't it? And when
yeah,
it swings the other way, people can leave. And
yeah,
people can effectively say, well, okay, if I'm going to work here, I have to accept those conditions. But
mm,
there's no point me moaning and whinging about it because I've accepted that. This is the choice I've made to work
great
in a
choice.
place that is like that. And that's the point, isn't it? The
Yeah.
point is about not spending the rest of your life beating yourself up because you work there for a reason,
Mm,
because it gave you something. And if someone is deceiving you and telling you things to make you do things, then you know the character of that person, and when it's time to move on, you can do that
mm,
or not.
yeah.
Some people who like a bullying, but some people do like to be bullied.
Okay. Some actually, have you seen somebody who likes to be bullied?
Oh yeah, yeah, of
Ah,
course. That's
why
called they're
why do
called
they want to be
victims.
bullied?
But because if you're a victim, there's nothing you value more than being bullied.
Okay. Yeah.
And you often find that, particularly in family firms, where you have a member of the family who is bullied and is bullied by everybody. And
Mm,
that's their place. That place is in the team is to be the person who's constantly the person who's made fun of, the
mm,
person who is belittled, and
mm.
all those other things. And it'll say things like, "Oh, we're only joking," or "It's character building." Of course, you're always complaining about this. There you go. But if they stay, then they're joining in, aren't they? Of
Yeah. They don't stand up for themselves,
course not.
don't draw the boundaries. They just allow everything to come.
And if you allow yourself for too long, what can happen is that you can actually buy into that and it becomes you rather than being your choice. It becomes who you are. My cousin has when she was 18, 17, 18, had a very bullying father. We suspect all sorts of terrible things. And her mother died. Her mother was on a dying deathbed with cancer.
Mm,
And she made my cousin promise she would look after her father till his dying day.
mm,
She never married. She never went anywhere. She never went out of the country. She looked after her father until his dying day, until he was 92. She has had no life, no children, nothing. So after the first 10 years,
everything tied to the father.
yeah, everything tied back to that family thing,
Mm,
that family promise.
mm,
And that often happens. And she lost the capacity to think about it differently. She
mm,
bought into the myth and then she got unabled to be able to someone that God. And she has no resilience because, of course, her father's died now. Guess what? She has no purpose.
mm,
And now she's talking about suicide.
mm, mm.
This is the thing about family
Yes.
businesses, slightly reinforcing that family, that sort of
Mm,
adult-child relationship. Whereas if you go into and there's nothing better for you, frankly, and I
mm,
know you've done this, but
mm,
you leave the family business, you go into normal commerce and then come back because at least you have you become your own person. You've been shaped or molded by a different sort of leader, and
mm.
that's very good for succession.
Sometimes the owners or the pioneers or the wealth generators want to leave their business or their wealth
Mm,
to, in quote, children who are respectful. And sometimes these respectful or these good kids that they describe is somebody they can bully, somebody they
yeah,
can run around.
yeah,
And that's also a challenge.
yeah.
And
They're
they
just choices.
they normally don't like the contenders. People are always contending with them. But maybe the contender may be the right successor,
Yeah.
but not the one you can easily bend. Yeah.
But the thing is, and I'm sure you'll see this, is we conflate the individual with the business. Now, in a limited company, where the shareholder and the family member can be different people. So in other words, if you're your business, if you are your business and that your business is you, so your identity is in the business. Your business is separate to you. There's you as a human being and there's the business. And
Mm,
this is why people who head up family business, especially who are the wealth creators, they
mm.
see themselves as being indispensable. And the business is not theirs. The business is them. And
Yeah.
that's a very unhealthy thing to be in. And it takes external people coming in and telling them that. Now, often with those people, once they see that from themselves, they get it very quickly because they know it's true. But also, they also are greedy enough or avaricious enough or hungry enough or to say, well, actually, I don't want my business because your business can be like another son, can't it? Well, I don't want to hold my own son back by my own actions. And
Mm.
so separating the business from your family can be quite interesting.
It's
I mean,
interesting.
you can own your own family business and not work in it. And this is like a radical idea to some people.
Yeah.
I've been working with a family business in my part of the world. It's a big architects firm, and
Mm,
the people that run it are all family. And I said, well, why don't you get us someone else who can run it? And they say, well, we can run it. And I say, you patently can't because it's failing. And
mm.
they'll say, but who else would do it? And I said, well, anybody,
Can do
because
it,
this
yeah.
business is not hard to run. Oh no, I said there are how many architecture businesses are in the UK? There's thousands. It
Yeah.
can't be that hard.
Yeah.
And most businesses are not hard to run.
Yeah. You also have in our context, you have business owners, wealth creators who combine the ownership, operations, and control of the business all in one person. And
Yeah,
if they are not there, nothing runs. And you have to run every little decision by them,
yeah,
even the cleaner, even
yeah,
all supervisors, all. any frontline staff, and so they want to control everything, and
Yeah.
that's the problem also.
But it's ego. And again, it comes back to Freud and such like. And if you are the business, then you get the business you deserve. And
Yeah.
if you're, and of course, the thing is about that person who's running the business in that way, if the business is successful and enjoying themselves, it's not going to change. So everybody else has to make a decision. And
Mm.
they may be put up with that decision, and there is no risk in that business. And it is by its very nature not resilient because that person is the single blocker for every single decision.
Yeah.
No one gets stronger in that business. And
Yeah.
then one day something happens in terms of change or a competitor,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
business is gone.
Yeah. Sometimes
Rightly
I
so.
think the fear of somebody running it down, because there have been cases where when they leave to an employee or a trusted person, they just run
Yeah.
it down. So
But
the
that's where the
structures may not be
owner,
right.
that's yeah, and that's where the owners become part of the governance team. So the
Yeah.
governance are holding those people to account. And that's the bit that people forget. That's the real power in a business is the governance piece.
Hmm. 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 And also you touch on the financial management and then the four quadrants. I think some secrets there or some information that will help to also curb all these owner combining everything because they are the budget, they are the process, they are everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a question, may I know how to deal with a CEO who is a bully in working environment without losing your job as an employee?
I mean that's a very difficult question to give a simplest. I wouldn't want Harriet to treat your question with any less respect than finding out a lot more.
Hmm.
But one of the things with bullies is bullies are quite easy to manipulate in a way because they have to be right, don't they? They have, and remember, a bully is very fragile. Bully is someone who's usually been bullied themselves. So what they do is they have a power imbalance. So you can often hoodwink a bully quite easier if you're a bit intelligent by telling them that's what they already told you once before. Oh,
Hmm.
this is what you said last time we were together. Did I? Yes, you did. I thought it was great advice. So there's that about bullies. We many bullies are obsessed with their own ego.
Hmm.
Um, but remember that if you're choosing to work in a firm with a bully as a boss, then you have to look after you have to look after yourself and know that you're working there for a reason. And whether you say, well, I'm going to put up with this boss because I get a good living or because then I can afford to give my family what they want, then at least you know why you're there. And sometimes that purpose helps as well. But both basically, bullies are quite easy to manipulate.
Hmm. Hmm.
Remember, they can't see anything else in their own world other than themselves and
Yeah.
their own power. And remember that their power, there's something I forget the name of this psychotherapist who said it, but someone talked about bullies often have what's called a superiority complex. They
Hmm.
think they're better than everybody else.
Hmm.
And when you think about that for a couple of minutes, you think to yourself, what's the cause of a superiority complex? It's an inferiority complex, isn't it? So you have to think you're better than everybody else if you think you're a bit of a worm. So and that's where you start to bully people. So
Hmm.
sometimes they have very fragile self-esteem. They have very trusted people. And
Hmm.
sometimes what you have got to be able to do is to figure out how to become trusted.
Hmm. You mentioned
And
succession planning. Sorry,
yeah,
you
go on.
didn't finish there, right?
Mm.
So you mentioned succession planning as a challenge in Africa and then Ghana. So Cyril again has a question that how does resilience come in to solve that problem, especially when generational values differ, the generational gap?
Yeah, well, I mean the generational gap's a fact. It's just a fact, isn't it? So that's
Mm,
that's you can't get around that because by its very nature, we have to be a generation to hand the business on. And
yeah.
I think what you discover as a parent is when you have children that are not resilient, there's no point blaming the children.
Mm,
You have to blame yourself because you were the parent.
okay.
So one of the things you've got to do as a parent is going to bring another one of your family members into your business. Is you have to figure out how to build their resilience. So you do things like giving them challenges, giving them risks, expose them to decision making, make sure that they have development, make sure that they're going out and thinking differently. If you've got someone in your own family you don't trust to take over, it's because you've done a poor job as a parent. because that's not their fault. They were a child, weren't they? So
Yeah,
how can they take accountability for being a kid? By its very nature,
yeah.
accountability is a feature of an adult person. Is
Mm,
that too rough? But it's true.
yeah.
I mean, I spend loads of time listening to people talking about the young generation, how they're terrible and this, that, and the other, and they're always the parents of that generation. It's like, well,
Yeah,
what were you doing then?
yeah, yeah. So Gilbert is also touching on what we mentioned first, because in this side of the world, they want you to conform. The
Of
owners
course.
want you to conform. So the question is, how do they raise kids who challenge the status quo? So especially you have some of them traveling outside Ghana or Africa to go to school in the UK, the US, and they find their voice. They are
Yeah.
vocal. They are able to challenge it.
Yeah, they
Most of
got
the
bigger, haven't
time,
they?
yeah, so they have a lot of
Yeah.
exposure, we're able to challenge. And it's always been the case with the practice
Yeah.
and experience. But
Yeah.
people who are raised in Ghana, who are
Every
raised in
generation's been like that.
Africa, who are
Yeah.
raised in Africa, where the culture of conform, keep quiet, study is talking, don't involve yourself when grown-ups are talking or having a discussion. So you don't
Yeah.
even have the chance to challenge anything.
Yeah.
So how do you raise an indigenous next generations to challenge the status quo? That,
Well,
that
that is a massive question, but let's
a
just look
question,
at
an African
you
question
know,
to an English man.
it's a very good question. And 60 years ago we had exactly the same thing, and it was called "How dare you be a woman?" And women have no rights, and women are not allowed to come to the workplace. And 60 years later, they're all over the place. Those pesky women, they're everywhere.
Yeah,
Thriving, and it happens because there's always constant revolution and evolution, isn't there?
yeah.
And each generation does get better and does get faster. It has more perspective. It will come and it will change the organization. Some changes are generational. Now, on the respectful thing, there's two different things about respect here. There's there's the respect you have for your parents in public, and there's the conversations you have in private. And I think what people mix up are those two things. So with my kids, I would say things like, "I'll have any conversation you want with me," but in public, you we'll discuss things, we'll talk about stuff and all that sort of stuff. And I work in a social enterprise where everybody is so young, it's really, really quite scary, and they have to be taught this stuff. I'll say, we will here discuss anything you want. We'll come up to an agreed position. And then what happens at the end of it, when we go out in public, you never disagree with me. They're rules.
Mm,
But in private, we'll talk about these things. And
mm,
because, that's how it works. Respect is not about what happens in the house often. Sometimes it's about what happens in public, isn't it?
mm,
Now, if you're short-sighted enough to think that you've got a son or a daughter who's going to take over your company and you don't give them the skills to do it,
yeah,
then more fool you, because the business won't survive and it won't be their fault.
mm, mm.
We, especially with parents, this is where
Yes,
the
yes.
parental thing gets confused.
Parenting
And
secrets.
this is why coaches are handy, because what you're doing with a coach is you're sitting down and saying, "But can you hear what you're saying?" And they'll say, "What do you mean?" They'll say, "You've just said this to your son." And they'll say, "Oh," and they'll say, "I didn't realize that." Genuinely, they don't, because they get locked into the parent thing and say, if you were not in your family business and you
Mm,
said that to a member of staff,
mm.
A, might get punched in the face. And
Yeah,
secondly, you might be taken to a tribunal. So do
yeah.
you really want to demean your son and therefore yourself in public? Because again, what family owners forget is when they're demeaning their children in public, they're demeaning themselves as well.
Mm, mm, mm. This is a parenting secret. Thank you very much. And it's been an amazing session. Lot of things to think about. Thinking of what we think about and putting our phones down, our social media, and then choosing the right way, choosing to reflect and not allowing ourselves to be manipulated or be bullied.
Yeah,
And also, bullied are easily to be manipulated. So we have to be careful not to also assume that position, because when you live with such a bully for a long time and you learn your ways around, you tend to also pick that nature, and when you are building your business,
Yeah.
especially when you are young, and when you build your business, you tend to be using the same style and you think you've
Yeah.
mastered it.
And influencing a difficult CEO is a skill. And if you
Yeah.
don't have that skill, you can learn that skill.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that's really important, isn't it? Because that's hope, isn't it?
Yeah. 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 Thank you. Thank you very much. It's an
Pleasure.
amazing session and it's been a wonderful session. So, guys, thank you for joining. So, our next conversation will be at the Africa Family Business Summit. So, the Africa
Very
Family
good.
Business Summit is in June, on the June 26th and then 27th. You remember when Dr. Russell was doing his presentation, he mentioned that one of the major challenges for Africa family businesses is access to capital and
Mm.
financial management. And by research, it's very relevant that we talk about these issues, we create opportunities, and we network amongst ourselves at such an important annual summit that brings together families across the African continent to talk about access to capital. And
Excellent.
the underlying theme is positioning family enterprises for financing opportunities. We believe that there are a lot of opportunities out there. So you can't mix this summit for anything. You have to participate. And when you attend, you gain access to both local and international investors. You enjoy a 50% discount on the Aspire Mentorship Program. So the mentorship program is a new program that we do for next generation in family businesses and young entrepreneurs. So it's easy for you to get discount to join, and you engage in a global and high-level networking opportunities. You participate in interactive panel sessions, breakout sessions, and inspiring keynote speeches. And you attend the Access to Capital Masterclass by the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development. The ECOWAS Bank is the title sponsor for this summit, and then they will do a masterclass on access to capital. So come learn the secrets, know how it will work for you so that we all solve our family business problems. You join an exclusive dinner for high net worth individuals when you are part of this summit. So guys, you cannot miss this. You visit afbssummit.org, register, apply, register. The review team will look at it and admit you for you to be part of it. June will be an amazing time in Ghana, so don't miss it. We'll send the slides to the registrants and along the line. So it's good you came online because we didn't start the recording early. And Dr. Russell shared very important points from the beginning. So it's good that you are here to learn. But we have some part of the session recorded, so we'll also share with you. So the slides and then the recorded session will be shared. So we are sorry we didn't start the recording early, but I think it's also good for people who were in the room at this point. So our flagship program, Africa Family Business Summit, do not miss it for anything. And we also encourage you to follow AFBS on LinkedIn, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and X. YouTube and X. So thank you guys for coming. Thank you very much, Dr. Russell.
Pleasure.
We shall surely meet again. We'll talk again.
Indeed, we shall. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.